Thank you very much for taking the time for this interview. Dipak, you're an expert in health data, in data interoperability and data privacy. And you've been involved in the EMIF project, a quite massive project on how to connect health data from a variety of sources funded by the European Union. Why is the European Union interested in such issues?
There is a massive opportunity for us to learn more from health data. We need to accelerate research. We need to develop better treatments, better care plans. We need to ensure patient safety. Because our population is aging, they are accumulating more chronic diseases, and so there is a need for us to really do better, to practice sharper, smarter medicine. We can learn a lot from the increasing volumes of health data that give us insights into large populations. However, there is a major challenge. That health data is collected in very different systems, in very different database architectures, under the management of different entities, different hospitals, different general practices, or research databases, disease registries. So we are prevented from really learning at scale because of the fragmentation. The project called EMIF was part of the Innovative Medicines Initiative program, which is actually co-financed between the European Commission and the pharma industry, which puts 50% of the funding into the project because they see the need to cooperate, not to compete with each other, in helping to stimulate innovation in this area. So it's responding to a societal need, responding to a data opportunity, but responding to a challenge of data fragmentation.
Isn't there a second challenge aside of data fragmentation, which is data privacy, which is the concern of people, what data is recorded and how this data might be used or even misused?
Data privacy is actually a really important point. When we think about the fragmentation of data, there is partly a technical data fragmentation, but also a purpose fragmentation. Data are collected by different organizations for different purposes. Very often a hospital will collect data because it's delivering care to individual patients. So they hold data effectively on behalf of their patients to ensure those patients have good care. It's generally accepted by most health systems and by the public that a hospital would look at its own data to study its patients and to make sure it's looking after them well. For example, to look for safety issues, to look at areas of inefficiency or delay and try and improve the care it delivers. But what we want to do is to lift that data to a broader frame of analysis. And therefore we would like the data to be reused in ways that go beyond the original purpose. There is fairly strong societal backing in general terms that we should make better use of health data. If you speak to most patients, they will be surprised that we're not learning more from their data. But on the other side, we see so many well-publicized stories of data breaches or misuse of data, not usually in healthcare, admittedly, in other sectors, but it creates a general anxiety in the public about trusting data aggregations, large databases. On top of that, of course, we have really important, highly respected European data protection, now a regulation, previously a directive, and national legislation that makes sure citizens' rights are well protected with regard to data. So part of EMIF was to look at what are the means of legitimately aggregating and analyzing data so that we comply with the original purposes in that fragmented space and comply with the General Data Protection Regulation and yet enable the research to take place. There are ways of processing the data that do protect privacy, and that's one dimension, but the other dimension, which is actually an area I led, is a code of practice, a set of rules of good conduct that researchers should uphold whenever they use health data, so that the purposes for which they use it remain in society's interests. So the data is used for research that brings societal benefit, not used for purely commercial gain purposes. And also that those individuals doing research protect the security and privacy of any data they're given access to.
What are the most important myths or anxieties you came across that people share when it's about health data?
I think there are probably two families of myths. On the side of people who are holding data, there is a myth perhaps that they need to protect it so fiercely against any use that was never anticipated when the data was originally collected, that they have a tendency not to be open-minded about the future needs of society and of the ICT industry and the pharma industry, and also of academic research and patient charities. So they don't move with where we have the knowledge gaps now, and there's a risk of, if you like, legacy thinking. I don't mean that we would like people who are custodians of data to break their rules and principles, but sometimes what we see is that they will say no as a reflex without actually exploring what's possible. So that's one kind of myth. Another kind of myth is actually on the research side. People sometimes think that if basic identifiers have been removed from the data, they can treat it as anonymous. We know that each person has unique patterns in the data. When you had a particular operation, if you had 2 different operations within a 5-year period, that reduces the number of people to quite a small group who may have had that particular health pattern, the number of children you've had, etc. And so if you have enough data on an individual, even if the classical identifiers are removed, there are still some risks of pattern recognition. Maybe not on every person, but there will be noteworthy people for whom it's possible to get a sense of who they probably are or might be. And that's not good enough. That's not going to win societal trust. So the code of conduct is really about the opposite side. It's about reminding researchers and making sure that even if they are granted a de-identified data set, they still treat it with respect, with care, they protect it, they keep it secure, only the necessary people use it, those people doing research only see the parts of the data they need, so you reduce the risk of the pattern being rich, and that they can't disclose information, that they shouldn't use it for additional purposes, and if they detect anything in the data that suggests it wasn't anonymized well enough, that they should report it back and help us all to be honourable citizens in protecting privacy.
Some people are afraid that health data might also be used by insurance companies or by their employers. How can health systems ensure that this does not happen?
There is a really legitimate fear in the public that data will be used in ways that they don't want and that disadvantage them. There is a natural hesitation of people to be fully transparent to their employer. We have to respect that. Employers may not be happy to know that that happens, but it does happen. It's not the right of people who use data to breach that. There is an anxiety about the insurance sector, not really the health insurance sector who run health systems or fund health systems, but the life insurance sector. That if they discover more about you than maybe even you know yourself, your life insurance premiums will go up. People don't really fear the premiums will go down. They only fear they will go up, or that they will become uninsurable, or there will be some issues that affect them. We have to be really respectful of those fears. It's difficult to argue at the moment that these are societal priorities. The societal priorities are to improve healthcare, improve the development of innovative treatments, that can be medical devices that will deliver a gentle, well-controlled infusion of a critical drug to a person while they're out and about in the office and shopping, rather than having to be in a hospital bed, for example, really liberating the person. Those are things society can understand. So if we want to scale up the use of health data, we have to respect that. We have to make sure, through codes of conduct, through whom we disclose data to, that those are the purposes it's used for. There are also marketing purposes. How can my product beat my competitor's product? Can I get insights from the data to allow me to have competitive advantage? When we consult the public, they don't want that use of the data. So our code of practice in EMIF was very clear about the focus of what is called research. So it's not market research, it's research that brings new knowledge that is for societal good. Now that knowledge can be embodied within products or services. It can just be published as an academic paper, but it has to have a societal return.
Did you come across differences in the attitudes of people of the different European member states towards integrating health data and use of health data? Or are these attitudes quite the same all across Europe?
We need to share data or analyze data at a European level. If you take rare diseases, no country has enough patients on its own to generate enough scientific findings that are statistically valid. We have to cooperate in order to help find enough patients either with a rare disease or with a narrow profile of a common disease, a particular subtype. We need to cooperate at a European level to share the insights across Europe. And we could only do that if every citizen can feel confident that if their data are being researched on in another European country, that research group is governed by very, very similar, almost identical rules to what would be happening in their own country. So we need to respect the comfort, confidence and trust of European citizens at a European scale. And I've found, to my really great delight, that there is a strong consistency across Europe among the people who want to use data, the people who have data, the people whose data it is, our society, the public.
In Austria, a few years ago, a so-called e-card was introduced, which is a card just like a bank card with a microchip on it that is used in every doctor's office. So you don't get treatment without this e-card. And all of your illnesses and treatments and even the allergies are recorded on this card. So this was the first time where data integration was really visible for people. How would people feel that this data integration is happening? Does it have any effect on the daily life of people? Or is it just something that's important for researchers and policymakers?
There is a recognized patient safety risk when patients are being treated by multiple professionals who don't know each other's medication, prescriptions, who don't know what is being planned or what has been undertaken. Patients are at risk when that happens. One of the challenges faced by all of these national e-health programs that have sought to integrate is how they communicate to the public the need to know. That is, if a health system employs thousands and thousands and thousands of doctors and thousands and thousands and thousands of nurses, and you're a patient in that health system, does that mean every one of those tens of thousands of professionals can see your record? Or is there some gatekeeping thing that says, now you've walked in the door of a clinic, that clinic team can see your record. But if you hadn't walked in the door of that clinic, your record would never be accessible to them. Those are the kind of assurances people want to see in order to feel that this is not a slippery slope into mass access. After all, health systems are massive national employers. Almost everybody will know somebody or have a family member who works in a health system. So the idea that your neighbour can see your record may feel quite unpleasant to some people. So the health systems have to make sure the advantage of the card method that you described for Austria is that actually the record is only unlocked when the card is presented. So the patient is actually, in a way, being invited to give consent to that access. So that's quite an elegant solution.
By now we talked about the present and the past. What about the future? And what about data which is not collected by doctors, clinics or hospitals? So for example, tracking data, fitness data, smartwatches, tracing your blood pressure, tracing your heartbeat. Will this data be soon integrated into these health systems? Will this data be used by doctors, by insurances?
We are at an amazing time. Historically, the health data on you as an individual was mostly entered into systems by other people. Historically on paper, nowadays into computer systems by other people, was held by organizations you had health or care from. With smartphones, with wearables, with sensors, we are going to see a shift. The predictions are that the volume of patient-generated data will be greater than the volume of professional-generated data in the next few years. So everything that we've considered up to now about engaging the public in trusting how research or healthcare learning uses data held by others about them is going to shift. The trust relationship now has to be with patients and healthy citizens themselves to say, we would like you to share your data, the data you hold in your apps, on your devices, with us so that we can study that. There are massive opportunities here. If you just think about something like your blood pressure. Your blood pressure may be taken if you have a blood pressure issue every few months by a health professional in a clinic setting when you're nervous and your blood pressure is probably a little high anyway. Imagine if instead your blood pressure was being measured periodically at home, in a relaxed situation or at work, or actually in those stressful times when you're late for work and you're rushing, which the doctor doesn't see, but actually maybe that's when your blood pressure goes up and that's when you're at risk. Yes, these are going to be massive data volumes. People aren't going to look at them by eye. If you had to look at 300 blood pressure readings and just use your eye to look at them, that'll be difficult. But we're going to have smart apps, algorithms that will look at that data for us computationally and alert us to trends. Trends upwards, trends downwards, single readings that are really off the scale. So we don't have to worry about, I think, data volumes. What we do have to worry about is bringing society on board. Now the trouble is we've tended to think up to now that we want from citizens their data. A one-way flow. Please let us have your data so we can learn. But that's very disempowering and disrespecting, because actually patients themselves will not only be data collectors, they will be autonomous decision makers. The opportunity space is not only in the one direction of scientists learning from that data, which is huge enough, but the other direction. How can we give patients back the tools, the technologies, the smartness, so that they can really take a stronger role in their own health management? Not everybody wants to do that. Some people prefer a more passive role. They want somebody else to look after them. We must respect that and not push onto those people what they don't want. But there are an increasing number of people who actually want the disease not to control their life. They need to be in the driving seat, and the data helps them do that.
By now we talked about diseases, health data, doctors. What about chronic diseases as obesity? Has data the potential also to change people's behavior?
We should be thinking about citizens, people in society, and prevention and lifestyle. The data has a huge opportunity here. I don't just mean body weight measurements and having a little app on your phone that tracks your body weight. People have done that for years on paper as well if they wanted to. That's not revolutionary. But the ability to do things like photograph a meal that you're about to eat and send that photograph to a processing unit somewhere that is able to start to analyze from the images of your plate what are the various protein, carbohydrate, fat mixtures that you're about to eat, what's the calorie intake, and to start to give you feedback on that. That when you go shopping, you can scan the food items before you put them in your basket, and the app is building up a picture of the things you buy and is able to then give you feedback on where you might make a substitution. The ability for people to be reminded about things like stress levels, so having heart rate tracking, so people with high blood pressure maybe, if there is monitoring going on, they can be alerted to the fact that this is a point where if they can, they should try and just take a short break from whatever they're doing because their heart rate's gone up or something has happened to them. So ways of helping people to titrate themselves, their lifestyle, against health risks. Phenomenal opportunities.
I think this is the easy and light future. The more dystopian future would be quite easy, saying, well, with this meal your health insurance now goes up so and so many %, and then we end up with a kind of scoring system. Are these dystopian visions just science fiction, or thinking about the social scoring system in China just a few years ahead?
It's two different things that disturb me. One is that having described the real knowledge discovery opportunity from data, supporting people with their own lives, we're shifting using the data into an agent of control. And I think that is a really disturbing shift in the discussion that we're having about data. Personally, I would see that as quite frightening. I think that using the data in ways that are not in spirit with partnering people it's going against the very change that we are introducing into healthcare, which is to say, instead of saying that the doctor always knows best, has all the information, all the knowledge, we want to shift to a partnership relationship where patients and well people have data too, they have knowledge too, and they make shared decisions. What I'm picturing from the landscape of governmental or rather control is going back in the opposite direction and say you no longer are empowered to make decisions. The decisions are being forced on you by economic levers that mean that if you disobey, the pain is too severe. But there's a second reason, because these kind of controls applied to a population are about saying everybody's identical. The control applies to everybody equally. But we are not identical people. If you take a severe disease like a cancer that's quite advanced, and we just think about that patient having to make treatment choices now, and maybe this is quite an advanced cancer treatment, this is maybe a final opportunity to have one more round of treatment, and there are 2 or 3 different treatment options with different probabilities of success, but different levels of disability they'll introduce, of illness, of side effects, of unpleasantness that they may introduce. A person is left with some difficult choices about how much they want to weigh up quality of life versus quantity of life. Probability of more years or more months versus how those months will be, because you could be really ill for more months, really, sick, lose your hair, etc. Or maybe you have fewer months, but actually you're feeling pretty good during those few months. That's not an easy choice for an individual to make. Can an algorithm impose that on the whole of society? I don't think so. So if we start to see control, we're not only seeing the disempowerment of the citizen, but we're seeing a stereotype imposed on everybody, which is really contrary to what the whole spirit of this data liberation movement is, which is to more personalize health experience, wellness, disease and treatments.
Should this discussion be a societal discourse on the future of smart health, or is this just a discourse of experts?
I have a very strong view about this kind of discourse about where technology should go, and that is that it must not happen without engagement of the public. So experts really should not be discussing on their own where things should go. Of course, experts have to have very technical discussions about how to achieve certain technology objectives. The scientists have to get together and discuss the latest technologies and how they'll leverage them. But the purpose, the mission, the objectives of innovation, what's it going to do for people, what functions and features and capabilities do we want to prioritize if we have limited budgets, those should never be made in closed scenarios. They need to be done by explaining the choices to the public in ways they can understand, just as a good clinician will explain disease and treatment choices to a patient in language for that person. The public has to have their opportunity to voice their needs, that they're not identical. The public are not a singular entity when it comes to their digital skills, digital literacy, health literacy. So that means a diversity of channels, a diversities of level of granularity have to be provided.
So how could such a discourse at European level involving citizens from very different cultures, countries and languages be organized?
When we're talking about communicating to the public in areas where there are many different stakeholders involved on the expert or the delivery or the design side, it's impossible to remove vested interests. It's far better to be honest about what they are and to have then editorial policies that moderate across the vested interests. If a company has a particular innovative space that they're active in, of course they would want to present the opportunity that that innovation has in ways that are favourable to their own business models downstream. That's understandable. To pretend that the company could do so objectively in a transparent way is unreasonable, but we shouldn't expect that. But what we should expect is that when candidate materials come into a pool to assemble into a documentary for television, an internet site, that there is then a second layer, an editorial governed layer that is looking to present balance, and that editorial board has representatives from various stakeholders, but including, importantly, societal members who have some knowledge in how to communicate to the public.
Thank you very much.